All right. And here we are. It is May 30th, 2025. And this is a session that I've been looking forward to for a long time. Brian, how are you? My name's Greg. This is Brian. We're going to talk about
I am
bourbon and
great.
technology and all sorts of stuff.
I'm great. Having a great
Good to see you. I
day.
think the last time, yeah, yeah. Um, so we're going to talk about a little bit about bourbon. I think on my agenda, Brian, is I really like to talk about the bubble, the bourbon bubble.
Okay.
um, what you got going,
Yep.
because I see you guys do an awful lot of really good tastings and analysis. So I'd like to hear more about that. And then some global issues that I've got going. But I know for the audience, at least, it's you and your daughters do a lot of I love calling it deep dive analysis on all sorts. I mean, give everyone your website, what you've been doing. I go there all the time. I like it a lot. Tell us what you're up to.
Well, 5 years ago, it's hard to 5 years. Oldest daughter and
I know.
Hannah, and I started a website, and it was basically designed to be a repository for all the reviews that we wrote. Most of the reviews that we were writing were for ourselves, so that we could say, "Oh, okay, I remember this, or I remember that, or the next time I want this, I can go reference the review."
Hmm.
5 years, last December, counting up the reviews between the two of us, and now my youngest daughter's involved as well. Um, we've got 360 plus reviews between the three of us. Now, I will tell you that's not
Wow.
360 whiskeys. I have 200 plus, and the girls make up the rest of it, with Hannah being probably, I think, 150, 60 ish. So whatever the math is. So that's kind
Right.
of how it all got started. And then we decided, you know what, maybe we should write some articles. So we wrote articles about things. And one of the two of the biggest articles that we've had lots and lots of hits on. One is about the infinity bottle. So we started an infinity bottle project, and then we've been curating that for the last 4 or 5 years. And then the other one I wrote was about a year ago, and it was entitled Blanton's on Secondary. And I stuck it right in the face of everybody who was going to read it. I said, people who walk
Hmm.
in the liquor store, if you're coming in asking for Blanton's, the liquor store clerk hates you. And then from there, up or down or sideways or whatever. I actually had the Idaho State Liquor VP email me thanking me for the article,
Oh,
because he
really?
couldn't
Wow.
believe that I would be audacious enough to actually call people out. And he says, it's true. We don't like you. It's pretty wild. He's since retired, so I can say these things about him. But I thought it was pretty funny.
That is funny. And
See, what was it?
that's
2
still
years
true.
ago? 2.5 years ago? Yeah, yeah. 2.5 years ago, we decided let's go a little bit wider on this, and we started a podcast. So we do a 10 episode series. There's a couple of reviews. We do a review at the very first episode. We do a review in the middle of the season. We call it a season, and then the last episode we do each series is a listener's pick. So what we do is we go into our bunker and we throw out 4 whiskeys. And we say, listeners, you pick the one we're going to review. So Sunday, a couple of days from now, we are going to be reviewing Heaven Hill grain to glass rye. And it's an experimental. They're doing it every year now. And it's an experimental that Heaven Hill is doing, that they are focusing on corn, a specific varietal of corn made by Beck's, the hybrid seed corn people that make the bulk of the corn that's grown in Kentucky specifically for whiskey. So we've never had it before. It's going to be fun. We had some options there. The other options had a Blood Oath Pact 11
Mm.
finished in tequila barrels. We really wanted to do that one. It was not the runner-up. The runner-up was Woodford Reserve batch proof, 115, 119 proof. And then the last one we had a listener call in or ask us about Kentucky Owl Confiscated, and we threw that in there. And
Yeah.
so we had some whiskeys that you wouldn't normally find on the shelf, and that's how we do our listeners pick. So
Cool.
and then along the way, we do other things too.
What?
We expose the distillery. Go ahead.
Well, we got a
We
little delay,
expose
so
the
I apologize.
distillery. No worries. We talk about proof. Hannah, being an archaeologist, decided that she wanted to do one on whiskey archaeology. So we did a podcast on Glenlivet over in Scotland. It kind of was neat because they are actually doing an archaeological dig on the Glenlivet property, and they've uncovered the original Glenlivet distillery from 150 years ago. I always do a history episode. This history episode we just came out of was 1810 to 1869, the distillers that were prominent, maybe some you didn't even hear about before. It's been a fun thing to do. Frankly, we would like to have more listeners, so maybe you can help with that. But it's mostly just for us and mostly just to hear ourselves talk and laugh and have fun. And we certainly do poke fun at one another. It's all about fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think on that note alone, just doing it for yourself is either going to attract or not going to attract. I mean, what happens, and I know you know this, is these guys they get out there and they start doing it for themselves, and then they start getting popular, whatever that is, and then they lose what it was they had in the very beginning, and it becomes more productive. There's a higher production. They start getting bottles sent to them from all over the place, and there's a feeling that you have to review them in a certain manner, and especially nowadays with the AI and everything, I don't the trust level of a highly produced piece is lower than mistakes that are made on camera, right? Or stuff like that. I mean, Joe Rogan does it. He's very polished now, but in the old days, everything went blank. They were smoking dope on TV and all sorts of crazy stuff. Anyway,
well, we are
so
not polished.
yeah, well.
We're not polished. I use the free program Audacity to edit our audio. It's one day just for fun as I'm doing the edits. I pulled out every yup, every every possible faux pas we could do, and put it on a separate track. It was almost 8 minutes of laughing, joking, poking fun, and it was just the goofiest thing. And one day I thought, man, that'd be interesting to just post.
That's not, yeah, your B-roll. That'd be good.
But it's actually pretty hard to do that. So, but that's what we do.
Well, hey, so you mentioned corn and rye.
Yes.
So, like right now, I'm doing. This is what I'm doing.
Okay. Wild Turkey 101 rye.
Right. 101 rye.
Tell it's rye and because of the green label.
Yep. I've rediscovered rye again, which doesn't surprise me. But I did this. I did Old Forester. I mean, Bulleit's always been out there. I think Jack Daniel's has a rye now that I haven't tried yet, and I saw a single barrel. But I'm, well, my history is just for everyone else is, we built a bar with 140 bourbons on the shelves. We started with Jim Beam, Jack Daniel's, and somehow there was a Scotch in there that everyone thought was bourbon, and but it went from there. So I've tasted just a bunch of different stuff. my palate now is 101, right, or higher, which I like, and now rye. I really, really like the rye, the extra flavor. So it's very interesting that you're doing the corn with the rye. What was the one? Was an Angel's Envy? What,
It's
who are you
called
guys doing?
Heaven Hill. It's
Urban Hill.
called Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Rye. They've done three versions. They did a bourbon, they did a rye, and they did a wheated. And I don't
Okay.
have the specs. Maybe I
Okay.
do. Maybe I do.
Well, you know what? Talk about the corn because I just got off the phone. The
I'm
phone.
a
I got off the call with someone who was doing blue corn, who and it's in Kentucky, and then I'm real close with the red corn person out
yeah,
of Wisconsin, Jay Henry, and
right,
they've always been grain to
right.
glass. They grow everything there. They just started to grow rye, so their rye is going to be their rye. They do everything but distill on site, but it's the red corn, um, aged in right there on the farm and bottled right there on the farm. So which there's so many interesting points there. It's red corn, which I find fascinating. It's grain to glass, which everyone now likes, and they're a smaller concern,
Yep,
which dovetails nicely into the big the bourbon bubble. Right? We talked about it before, maybe a year or two ago. Well, maybe that one.
right.
Where do you think we're at with the bubble right now, Ryan? What's your feeling?
Well, as a, I'm going to call myself a bourbon aficionado, but I'm not. Uh,
Uh,
as a bourbon
there you go.
aficionado, there's too much bourbon. There's, but it's not you think. There's too much Scotch. This I've been doing in every podcast. We put a news story out, or three news stories, or whatever it is. One of the news stories I'm
Okay.
going to be talking about is exactly what you are saying. Nobody wants to talk about this. The oversupply. Right now, there are roughly 40 million barrels of Scotch aging in Scotland. Okay. Only 18 million barrels in Kentucky that are aging
All right.
right now. I was blown away by the amount of Scotch compared to the amount. Maybe my number is billion. I think it, who knows? It's enough
That's the
for
scale, though.
two
You're right. I
barrels
mean,
for every man, woman, and child.
right.
I was saying it's enough for two barrels, 2.5 barrels for every in Kentucky. I mean, the
Right.
proportion of barrels aging is just weird. It's just weird.
It
And
is.
and it's
Brian, what
also
I look at is I look at the amount of empty barrels people are trying to resell, right? Because bourbon, you can only use the barrel once. So how many empties
yep,
are out there?
yep,
And that market is in a glut.
yes. So the other
So
part of it is it's hard for me to visualize this, but because there's so much bourbon aging and because people aren't buying as much bourbon, that's a bad statement because they're buying just as much as they were pre-COVID.
correct.
They're not
Yes.
buying what they did for the bubble during COVID and shortly thereafter, but we just
Right.
eclipsed what pre-COVID numbers were. But the problem is the capacity of the distillers has gone crazy. Just recently, Buffalo Trace has come online with a brand new distillery that they can double their output,
Yeah.
and they're not even the biggest distiller.
Right.
Heaven Hill, Brown Foreman, they're investing in warehouses because they have no place to put this stuff. And because of that, the people in Scotland are worried there aren't going to be bourbon barrels available because they're all full.
Yeah. Well, that's a good. Ooh, I
So
didn't even
they're
think about
looking at
that.
ways. So they are looking at ways to take the barrels they currently have and carve them out, put grooves inside, refire them on their own countries, or in their own country, so that they have some place for storage. I mean,
Wow.
this is a serious problem. I mean, uh,
Wow.
this news story that we're going to talk about Sunday night, Scotland in the late 80s had what was called a bourbon lock, LOCH, which is term for lake.
No.
There was so much
Yeah.
a whiskey lock. There was so much whiskey that
They
distilleries
dumped
had.
it.
There was no
They
place to
dumped
sell
it.
it. I mean, it just there was, yeah, and frankly, that's kind of what helped them get back started again, because all of a sudden there was all this
Right.
aged whiskey sitting around, but they're all worried, where are we going to put this stuff? So they're getting Calvados casks from Spain. They're getting, who knows? They're getting Sauternes uh, brandy kegs out of
Brandy.
France.
Okay.
They're getting,
The
yeah,
brandy and
I mean, they're just
sherry,
getting these
probably.
casks from wherever. Yeah, exactly. So I guess the saving
That's
grace here in this country, we've got American single malt that can put it in any barrel they want. It doesn't
yeah.
have to be new charred oak, so they can reuse these barrels.
Mhm. Well, that's very. I didn't consider that side, and there's a part of me that says, well, there is too much Scotch because there's not enough bourbon. But there, I think what I find. Well, we should might as well talk about it. So I've opened up a little. It's very timely. Um, everyone that not everyone, a lot of companies, bourbon folks are going to the EU, going to Europe to try. London. I think it was Buffalo Trace maybe a year ago opened
Yes,
up a location in London. Some people are even going into Ireland, stuff like that. I- Personally, I think that is crazy. You have to be big to go into that area. You got to have enough overhead. I would not want to try and sell in the EU because, yeah, it's the EU, but every country is different. Every country is different once you're there. So it has the big guy. So about a year ago, I partnered up with a dude who lives in Taiwan, and our first shipment landed 2 days ago in Taipei. Our goal is to bring bourbon into Taiwan. Now, everyone else is looking over into Europe for now. We think once the secret gets out, everyone's going to come into Taiwan. 99%. If you look at the global market for Scotch, Taiwan is number 3 in consumption of Scotch. The bourbon market, the penetration is only 1 or 2%, maybe 1.5% of the whiskey market in Taiwan is bourbon. Okay. They like and they love their scotch, but they like and have loved their scotch for decades. The only thing they like more than scotch is anything that has to do with America. They love the baseball, the Chevrolet, the everything that, it's the same thing, whatever, rock and roll. So our goal is just to get to 2 or 3%, and we'll be fine. The first one to land that we brought out is Jay Henry from Wisconsin. Right. Um, we'll see how it goes. But while I'm in that that mode, it's very interesting to see how people respond. And I think what I was happy to see is that these are the local guys, the smaller guys, that they're happy with just, I mean, I had him say, we're working with someone else out in Mississippi. He goes, well, we're fine just servicing the Mississippi area. We don't need, right? I go, yeah, you're right. Just hunker down, sell locally. But what do you think about Taiwan? And there's no skin off their nose to try it. It might work, it might not work. It's not like Canada. There's no tariff issues. Um, the cost of shipping and all that stuff is a little bit prohibitive, but not that much. And if it hits, it's going to hit big. So that's where we're going. But I liked the J Henry because they use the red corn, right? It's an American story, and
there's a
we're
story.
looking forward to that. It's a story. What is the story? Is that what you asked?
No, it is the story. The corn is the
Yeah.
story, and that's the whole
Yeah.
thing about bourbon. Bourbon itself is a story.
Oh,
I mentioned that we talked about this history episode we did. there was a woman,
Yeah.
Catherine Spears, who in 1818 uh, allegedly had one of her people write down a recipe for sour mash whiskey. It is the first
Okay. I like it.
written record of sour mash whiskey. On the flip side of the document was sweet mash whiskey. So this sweet mash, that's new make. You start from scratch. You have a clean
Right.
barrel, whatever. Starting from scratch, that's sweet mash. Sour mash means there's left over from the previous batch, and that's what you're starting with. Think sourdough bread.
Right. And I'm
Okay.
glad you brought that up. So
She
that's
couldn't
the
read or
The Tennessee sour mash, Jack Daniels, versus something else,
it
right? Is
doesn't
that
matter if it's
am I
Tennessee or
wrong?
whatever.
Right.
Yeah, sour mash, just the beginning, just how you started. So
Okay. Go
she
on.
couldn't read or write. A lot of calamity happened in her life. Her first husband was killed in the Revolutionary War. She married her husband's brother-in-law. He died when after she gave birth to 12 children. I mean, it's just all kinds of things. But along the way, she was a distiller. Nobody knows of her, basically because after she stopped distilling, her family kind of dispersed and didn't get involved with it. But written
Okay.
on the recipe in a different color ink and a different handwriting is the date 1818. And she was smart enough and wealthy enough to have lots of lawyers. When she actually passed, I found it interesting. When she passed away in 1848, she was worth $13,500, or over $500,000 in today's money.
Okay.
So her legacy was her written recipe predated Jim Crow or Old Crow recipe that actually was the first experimented with that documented exactly everything they were doing about sour mash whiskey. He perfected sour mash whiskey. I tried to find a link. Was there a link between these two? They lived 120 miles apart. They lived essentially 20 years apart from one another.
Right.
But what's to say that what she was doing isn't common in what was going on around her area?
At the time.
And then her relatives did it elsewhere, and it got to Jim Crow, and who knows? Who knows?
Sure.
It's
Sure.
just an interesting story.
Wow. So
It's all about
absolutely.
stories.
Well, it is all about. Yes, it is. That's one of the big. That's the attraction. I'm often reminded of the old Johnny Walker commercial, right? When they had the guy just walk. He's walking, famous actor, but he's going through the whole Johnny Walker story from the very beginning. But there's a story there, but that's just one story, right? The story you just
Mhm.
brought up, I never heard before. I never heard that, right? So,
I
and you
didn't either,
mentioned some
and
interesting
I was.
things. Yeah.
I, who knows? I was researching to put together a broadcast, and I stumbled
Hmm.
across her. And I'm
Well,
thinking, is there a story here? And from
yeah.
her, I built it both directions, closer to the turn of the century, 1799 to 180, whatever, and then
Hmm.
progressing beyond. I mean, it was just an interesting story. Plus, she's a woman. My two daughters eat that kind of stuff up. I think it's cool. I mean, it's just a
It is cool.
great twist.
Well, now then I should ask you, where does the story end then? Did it work its way into
Well,
Tennessee? Did someone from Jack Daniels pick it up?
it
You know what I
it
mean?
it doesn't really. Yeah, her later history in life, there wasn't a lot other than uh, one of the entries was she paid taxes on 100 gallons of whiskey. I mean, it was just interesting how all the things kind of fit together.
Right.
And that was in early 1848 or whatever. Um, the census, it was written in the census of 1840 that she could not read or write. I mean, it was just some really cool things that have no bearing on anything, but they were fun to know.
Well, what's the time frame for in terms of Uncle Nearest? Was it around the same time or?
Uncle Nearest, yeah, yeah, and we finished with a guy by the name of Dan Call. Dan Call had a grocery store. He was a minister, and he had a grocery
Yeah.
store in Tennessee, and he hired uh, a black man. Basically, he was a slave. I don't think he was hired at that time, but he was running Dan Call's still in the behind the grocery store. And for whatever reason, the product took off. The grocery store was super busy, so he was looking for help, and he hired this young 15-year-old kid, Jasper, somebody, guy named by the name of Jasper Daniels. Who's heard of Jasper Daniels? Well, allegedly, Dan Call went to Uncle Nearest and asked Dan to follow, or Dan asked Nearest to tell this Jasper kid, I need you to teach him how to make whiskey. Well, it turns out that Jasper is the famous Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
And when Jack this was 17 years old, Dan Call sold his still to Jack. Jack, the war is over. The Civil War is over. Jack hires Uncle Nearest and is the first, America's first black master distiller. And since Jack Daniels got started, there has always been a green working for Jack Daniels.
Oh, so I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's one working there right now. Basically, what he did is he hired all of Nearest Green's sons, all of his grandsons, and they just kept on going for years and years and years. I mean, it's just a cool story. So that's how I wrapped up. Yeah, that's how we wrapped up our history lesson.
See, that story will resound around the world. That it's just a cool story, and people dig it, and it's so American. That's kind of why I really like what I'm doing, bringing it out to especially the Far East. I mean, it's just off the coast of China. It's the gateway into Singapore and Japan and Australia, and all this stuff. And like that, if that little reminiscence that you just did would just go, oh wow, that's how that happened. It's gonna ding ding ding. In today's world, man, everything is so tight. People, the Taiwanese love Americans, and we know it's 9,000 miles away, but in 30 minutes they could be right next door, right? That's how the world is going. In 15 minutes, if I've done it. Guys in Taipei are drinking bourbon, and I'm drinking bourbon here, outside Detroit or down in Florida. We're tens of thousands of miles away, but we're right next to each other and sharing these kind of stories. That's the coolest thing ever. It's better than, I don't know, it's better than computers, but anyway. So what do you know about the difference between red and blue corn? Because I don't know anything.
I know a little more than nothing, but not a lot.
All right, well.
It's just varietals. This corn that's going to be used in the Heaven Hill product we're going to be reviewing, it's very high in starch. And starch helps it with the distillation processes. Yeah. So the sugar and the barley, that's really why barley is in whiskey, is to give it the sugar something to eat to help with the fermentation. So this real high starch product is going to help with the fermentation. I haven't tasted it, so I really can't tell you what it's going to do, but it was grown specifically for Heaven Hill, specifically for this project, and it was distilled back in 2017. So their first release was about this time a year ago or thereabouts. So it's a fairly new product. We bought our bottle this year.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier this year, the corn, the bourbon came out first, and then the rye and the wheated whiskey came out second, or wheated bourbon came out second. But they're using that same corn in all three.
And so you've tasted it then?
I know I haven't. I haven't yet.
Oh, okay.
It's called the varietal is Beck's 6158. That's their that's their variety. Mash bill,
All right.
it's really different from Heaven Hill's other mash bills. It's 63% rye, 24% corn,
Mm.
and 13% malt
Oh,
barley.
so it's a rye
It's barreled
whiskey.
at yeah, and it's barreled at 107 proof,
Oh,
which is really low
yeah.
compared to what Heaven Hill typically does. They're usually up at 125. The idea being is it can mature a little differently, and then the barrel char on it is a number 3, which is what all of Heaven Hill products are. Real deep on the char. They're not making an alligator look like an alligator
Right.
skin.
Hey, you know what? Now that you brought
I'm
up the char
interested.
thing, yeah, I know sounds like I'm interrupting you. It's just a delay, but can you educate me on the difference between a char and a toast?
Sure. Typically, there are burns inside the barrel from a number 1 all the way through a number 7. Number 7 is
Mm-hmm.
basically charcoal.
Right.
Okay. There's not much left of the inside of the barrel. Most distillers are using a barrel char of a number 3 or a number 4 char. And anybody who's seen a pine tree out west looking like that's what a number 4 char would be. Alligator skin, they typically call it, or alligator char.
Okay.
A number 3 isn't quite burned as much. When we talk in terms of burning, they set the barrel over an open flame. They fire that flame. A number 3 char runs about 45 to 50 seconds. The number 4 char goes up to a minute and 20 seconds or thereabouts. So the
Oh,
more burning of the inside of the barrel
okay.
opens up the wood so the whiskey can interact with more surface area. The more surface area it interacts with, the more the barrel influences the whiskey.
Okay.
So a
Okay.
number 4 char is also going to add some smokiness, more smokiness to it, because there's more charcoal
Makes sense.
on
Yeah.
the inside of the
Physics.
barrel.
Okay.
Smokiness with a number. So you asked about the rule in the U.S. Rye and bourbon must be stored in a charred oak barrel. So it has to have a char, but it can be finished in a toasted barrel. What a toasted barrel is just what you think it is. So if you set your toaster on the lightest setting, the toast comes out a little crispy, but it's still white.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you turn it all the way to the other side, it comes out burnt, but it really still looks like bread. Okay. Number 1 char or number 1 toast would be just a little bit of color to the wood. In other words, it's not bright white anymore. It's got a little bit of tan in it. A number 2 toast with a little bit more tan. Number 3 toast, that's my favorite kind of toast. I put butter on it, melts in just fine. Think of what you really, what you imagine. That's exactly what it is.
Right. Okay.
So the toasting helps allow the whiskey to pull out the vanillins in the wood. So that's where that's coming from, the reasoning why they're doing it. I mean, that's one of the things on our agenda is do a podcast about barrels. I mean, you could talk for
Okay.
hours about barrels.
Oh yeah. And you know what? There's so many different things. So let me see if I get this down. So the char at a 3 opens it up. It's the age in the char, and they pull it out, and then they say it's toasted, so they're going to run it through put it in a barrel that's only
Put it back in
been
the barrel.
toasted,
Yes.
and for a certain period of time. Now,
it helps refine it a little bit.
right. So when we char a barrel, do we burn out the vanillas?
No, it actually helps open them up.
Well, no. When we
It
do,
helps.
no. What I
It
mean is
helps the
char. When we char
Yep.
it, does it burn out? So then when we put it in a toasted barrel, does it bring it back? What I guess the question is, what does the toasted barrel
the
bring
toasted
back?
barrel. It's not bringing anything back, but what it's doing, it's typically refining the flavors. It softens the edges.
Oh, okay.
So what's happening is that the barrel, the interaction of the whiskey going in and out of the barrel is pulling out the fatty esters and all of the other things that the barrel is giving that it can't do because it's heavily burned on the inside. I mean, there's so much science to barrels that it's just crazy.
Yeah. So it doesn't do anything with the proof or anything like that, right?
No. The proof has to do with, real simple.
Well,
the proof has to do with the amount of evaporation that comes while it's being aged.
Okay.
Okay. We talked. I'm trying to remember what our proof. We talked about proofs in our podcast this last time. 101 to 110 proof. It's kind of an interesting range. A lot of distillers are working with barrel entry proof at that range to keep their whiskeys so that they don't get really high proof. So that just opens up a whole bunch. Most distillers are putting whiskey in the barrel at approximately 125 proof. That's the maximum it can go in. Okay. The least amount is about 104, 105. Michter's
let's
puts
back
all
up.
of their whiskey
Let's back up.
into the. Yep.
So I want to make this. So the bourbon, for bourbon to be bourbon, there's a requirement of proof in, right? And then proof out is a factor of evaporation over time, right? That's proof out. And then there's another step, right? Cutting. So it could be cut after it's out.
It could be. It could be.
All right. Okay.
So the theory is, well, probably more the theory, barrel or cask strength or full proof. Those are three different things. Full proof is, I'm going to use an example. Weller full proof is sold and bottled at 114 proof. 1792 full proof is bottled at 125 proof. Okay. Full proof means it went into the barrel at that proof. So Weller full proof at 114 proof went into the barrel at 114 proof.
And it comes out at 114?
Full proof went into. It could come out more. It probably does come out more.
Okay.
And then it's cut or watered down to bring it to that foolproof reading. Cask strength and barrel proof typically means that's what the barrel had in it when it was dumped.
Okay.
So if you get a bourbon 122 proof or 147 proof, that is what the barrel when it was dumped out. And that's what was bottled.
If it says barrel proof, correct. That's what it was when it was dumped. Okay.
When it was dumped.
Full proof means that's what it was when it went into the barrel. Okay.
Correct. Right. And it's almost always watered down to get it back to that level. Okay. So the theory is we tend to like bourbons that are in that 101 to 110 proof range, maybe 114.
Okay.
So if you go into the barrel at a lower proof, 107, like this Heaven Hill that we're speaking of, or 104 like Michter's, or 110 like Maker's Mark, to add water to it. They can sell it at that proof because it's in that proof range that they're targeting. So if you get a bottle that, typically referred to by aficionados as hazmat, it's 140 proof plus, that's probably been aged in a very hot and humid environment, so all the water evaporates out and the proof goes up because the amount of liquid left in the barrel is much less.
Okay. Wow.
So
thanks.
again,
let me interject this just for kicks. Barrel size. How does
most
that figure
barrels
in?
that we age, most barrels that we're aging in America are the 53 gallons, or roughly 200 liters. If you use a smaller barrel, the theory is there's more surface to liquid area. It should age quicker, but your yield is far less.
Yield is
that
less,
means you have to have
the
more
aging
barrels.
is shorter.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Okay.
That's
But if
very
you
interesting.
imagine,
I'm working with two different. One uses the 53 regular old barrels. The other one uses the smaller barrels. But it's because it was an it was a business decision to get fluid out
exactly.
as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And that brings up a thought. Yeah, that brings up a thought too, with fewer and fewer 35-year-old trees becoming available. Are we going to have to go to smaller barrels because there just isn't as much wood available as there was years ago?
Hold on. Now you bring in a whole nother variable. What is the lumber? Do you obviously know what the the tree status is? Is it seriously? It must be, right?
I don't know the exact status.
Okay.
I don't know the exact status, but this year, 2025, there was a federal mandate that says we need to start planting more white oak trees and cultivating them better, because we are going to run out of white oak. Right now, they're saying somewhere in the neighborhood of 2060. So we're 30 years out from running out of oak because we're using so much of it in the furniture industry, in the barrel and whiskey industry, in
right,
whatever. So in our Congress this year, the congressman, what's his name, Mitch McConnell, and the other guy from Kentucky, one Democrat, one Republican, stood up and said, "Hey, we need to start thinking about what's going on with our." Actually, he wasn't from Kentucky;
wow.
He was from Virginia, and it's a serious enough thing that we need to start thinking about it, because they harvest these trees when they're about 35 years old. So right now we're going to make it into the 2060s, but if we don't start doing something now soon, we may be running out of oak, and that's not good for our palates at all, is it?
Well, okay, this is excellent. So furniture. So the white oak is used for many different things, right? I mean, I'm asking you. I don't know. All right, so we got barrels, thousands and thousands of barrels, but furniture, is that because it's a harder oak, correct?
They typically they use a lot of white oak in furniture because it's such a tight grain.
Okay. And while we're at it,
it's just
the U.S. Constitution, the ship, I thought it was made of Carolina white oak. I could be wrong, but do you know anything on that? I mean, that's
I don't know.
okay.
I don't know. I the only thing I know about that is to me super interesting. When the boat was built, they cut twice the amount of lumber they needed and prepared twice the amount of lumber they needed
Yeah.
to build two ships, and then wrapped it all in tar and wrapped the tar in tarps and tarred it again and sunk it in one of the bays, so that when the Constitution needed refurbishing, they
Yeah.
pulled up this old lumber that had been cut back when it was originally built, and they rebuilt the boat using the lumber that had been harvested back when it was originally built.
That's a great. So, wow, I didn't know that part of it. Now I did do some
I don't know
research,
if it was
and
pine. I don't know if it was oak. My guess it's oak.
it was oak.
It's
It was
just
North Carolina white oak. And the reason I know that is I did research on how they built the Constitution well before I got into bourbon, and I also knew that a lot of people died to get the wood because they would cut a tree down based on the size of the part they were looking for, which was
yeah,
fascinating to me. If they needed one of those whatever bow to bow, edge to edge bow. It was the tree is big enough. We're going to cut that one down, and it was very dangerous because it was only available in the swamps. So people would
yeah,
die when you went in there to harvest that wood. I think maybe 8, 10 years later, I did some research on barrels and found out that it was white oak, and I did even more. I go, there's a connection there. It's
yeah.
just a wild thing, but wow, wow,
So
wow,
I'm gonna throw just a little thing that has nothing to do with bourbon at all at you.
perfect.
But boats. When people were building ships in England back in the 1300s, 1400s, they would take a
Okay.
tree
Yeah.
and bend a tree so that it would grow in the way they needed. So in the future, when they were going to build the boat, it was already bent in the shape they needed it.
Of course,
So
that
they're
makes
digging.
sense.
Yeah, we don't think that far ahead. That you're thinking 50 years. You're going to be dead by the time this tree is dug up or cut down and making a ship out of it. Because all of a sudden they were looking at all these ships and all these the valley of the tree or of the bottom of the boat, the way the hull's made, it was a one tree. How are you doing
Right,
that?
right.
We got to looking
So they
at it,
would
and
bend it.
all these trees had been tied and they'd been cultivated to grow into a ship. It's just
Well,
crazy stuff.
it, that's crazy, but that talks about the timeline back then, right? I
Mhm.
mean, well, it's the same with bourbon. There were people putting bourbon in barrels they knew they were never going to drink. I mean, that's a whole wine thing, right? But the
Yeah,
bourbon, same thing. Who knows? Um, and I know that the American Indians, did the same thing with trees. Now they did it. One story is that they would bend the trees so it would grow, just so that they could. That's a directive, a direction,
yeah,
right? Oh, it's bent that
yep,
way. You need to go that direction. They did it as
exactly.
landmarks, I guess. Wow. Wow. Hey, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a bottle of Lux Row Distillers. Lux Row is the facing brand of MPG, and it
Yes.
is 4 grain, and it's a double
Oh,
double barrel. So what
okay.
they've
What do you
done,
mean by double barrel?
so they have one barrel that is a wheated bourbon, and they have another barrel that is a rye bourbon, and they're blending the two together, so double barrel. And then because
Oh,
it's
okay.
been
Okay.
double barrel, it's been put back into the barrel again. So barrels in this case, because you've got two barrels, and then it's got corn, it's got rye, it's got wheat, and it's got barley in it. It's 150, 111 proof, 112 proof, something like that.
Very good.
I love it.
Do you like it? Is it
It's
good?
one of our favorites. Oh, it's one of our favorites. Whenever I see one, it's just, oh, that's coming home with me. And I just happened
I've
into
had
a
the
liquor
label
store.
before, but not that particular. I haven't had that one. But I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought up NGP because what do
Yep.
you think about those guys?
They have done an amazing thing. They are a contract
Mhm.
distiller. more than 60% of their portfolio is made for somebody else. This year, because of the bourbon glut and because they didn't want to be sitting on extra barrels, they've stopped the bulk of their contracting and are now focusing on their own product.
Whoa.
So, so
Really?
Lux Row, so Lux Row is in Bardstown, I believe Bardstown, and they're that is one of their facing brands. Another facing brand is Remus. That's
I
made
love
in
Remus.
Indiana. Yeah, I do too. I got a new one of those today too. It was a Remus Babe Ruth uh, signature.
Oh, really?
Basically, he liked the when he was playing baseball. That was his Remus was his brand of choice, or
Oh, I didn't
supposedly.
know that. Oh, so he's connected
So it's
with
got his
what?
signature on it. Not had any of that
The whole
stuff, but we like Remus real well. And
well,
anybody who's out
their
there,
fall release, the fall release is really good. Whatever I forget what they call it, the Remus fall
yeah,
is like wow.
they
What's it called?
release a new one each year. We've had a couple of them. I forget how they're labeled, but
Talk about a
yeah,
story. The
yeah.
Remus story is incredible.
It's
I mean,
kind of funny because the guy was a bad dude. I mean,
well, he
you
didn't
can
start
say
out as a
whatever you
bad
want.
dude.
What's that?
He didn't start out as a
Well,
bad dude. He was a prosecutor, and his
yep.
dad was a pharmacist. There's all sorts of weird stuff, and but then he
And,
ended up being
and
a bad dude. Killed his wife. It was like, ugh.
yeah, and he was also the first person in history to defend himself
Yeah,
and win with the defense of insanity. He was
yes,
insane when he did it.
he defended himself on an insanity defense. It was one of those trials of the century, right? Every newspaper
Yep.
covered it. He killed his wife on the way to the court. There's some in Cleveland of all
Yeah.
places.
Well, he
It's
killed his
just a
wife because his wife
oh
essentially turned him in to the
the
FBI.
FBI
Uh,
because the FBI
they
agent on the case hooked up with his
exactly,
wife.
exactly.
You
So
can't make that up.
the guy is a bad dude. I just come on, buddy.
It's a
But he
great
got
story.
into distilling because it was during Prohibition, and he was defending all of these distillers. He says, "Wait, there's money to be made here." So anyway,
Right. And yeah, and then he had well, Boardwalk Empire. He was part of the guy with
yeah,
Naki, whatever, brought the booze, brought out of Chicago because he was a lawyer in Chicago, got out of Chicago, and then Cleveland from Canada through Cleveland down to the New Jersey. That was his gig, and I think he's even in. He talked about himself in the third party, right? It's like Remus
well,
doesn't like the way you're talking to him. You're Remus.
yeah, it's a Seinfeld episode.
Oh my God. I mean, there's that story. I love the who's the monk? The bourbon monk.
That I don't know.
Oh, no, you'll remember. I just can't remember that. It's a very. I mean, it's not half of what it was but the brand name is still out there. I forget the name. All right, well, whatever. Um, okay, the bubble. So we were talking about corn. The red corn is this. Do you know much about the blue corn?
I
I
don't.
don't know.
My
Yeah. All
my,
right.
my guess it's just a varietal that was grown. I mean, if you look back in all of history, and corn is an American crop,
Oh
and
yeah.
if you look as we were growing up as kids, our parents would put out every Thanksgiving little ears of bad word Indian corn because it was
Yeah.
multicolored and it looked it was decoration. We didn't know
Right.
any better. Well, it's field corn, and it's the way corn grew. So if you look at the Mesoamerica and all the corn that was grown there, out of Oaxaca or wherever.
Right.
That's where the largest varieties of corn are coming from. My guess is, and I don't know, but my guess is the corn itself looked more blue, so they were making their whiskey out of blue corn. I couldn't tell you if it's high in starch or low in starch or whatever, but corn is easy to grow. It's super hard on the soil, but it's really easy to grow, and
It's
that's why we're not all drinking rye today.
yeah, it's a part of the American story as
We're
well.
drinking bourbon.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
And it grew so well that that it became a cash crop to where people could use corn to barter with.
Oh yeah.
Because you could actually take it and make corn bread or whatever your staples you needed.
And you could take a few
could feed
kernels and
people
grow
or
even
expand.
more corn.
Yes. And then when you had too much of it, you could make whiskey out of it. Whiskey could be sold at way more than the corn price could be sold out of it. I mean, it's interesting because one of my history episodes we're talking about it, my youngest daughter, Laura, goes, yeah, when I was in AP history, AP whatever, she said, yeah, we talked about corn being a cash crop and how many different things corn could be used for. You could use it for money. I mean, it was just the way it was. So
Bitcoin.
Yeah. Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
Maybe.
Hey, so now that you're on the history thing, do you know how did the whiskey get to America? I haven't I don't have a theory, but I've been led to believe Scottish people came over, settled in the Kentucky region or whatever, and they started making quote unquote whiskey. Is it from Scotland? Do you know or not?
Abraham Overholt.
Overholt?
Had a father. Overholt.
Yeah.
I forget his father's name. I should know it because I've talked about it, but somebody can look it up and tell me. The Overholts came from Germany, Austria.
Oh,
and they came across the ocean and they eventually migrated to eastern Pennsylvania in the Monongahela River area. And
I know it well.
They started making rye. Yeah, they started making rye there, and mostly because the barley just wouldn't grow. So barley is what they were making their spirits from back in the old country. And he didn't come from Scotland. He was a Mennonite, and he started making his rye whiskey because rye was everywhere. It grew. It was a weed. It grows.
Okay.
I mean, we have grass, ryegrass. I mean, well, that's basically where it came from. And then he said it's really good here. Let's get the Bohemians come over. The Bames, I guess, is how Laura would say it. Boeme, also from the old country, Ukrainian, Czechoslovakian. They came over and they settled in that same area. So now you've got the Overholts and the Bohems all in the same area. And their family started going places. The Bames left Pennsylvania, went south, went across the river. They went into Western, which was Virginia at the time, and then eventually migrated into Kentucky. So those were the two prominent families that really got things started. Later, Jacob Bam changed his name to become Anglicanized to Beam. We all Beam.
No way.
That's how that family got started. Yeah, that's how they got started. The Overholts, Jim Beam has later since bought that brand. but the Overholts and the Beam oldest still going names, and in fact, there's some infighting that's Jim Beam or Old Overholt. One or the other is the oldest trademarked whiskey brand that's still in existence.
Ooh.
The Overholts claim their trademark became legal in 1810, beating the Beams out by 2 years. The Beams say, no, we did it first, but our paperwork, because we weren't a state yet,
Oh.
Kentucky, whatever.
Right.
I mean, because they didn't become a
tough.
state until what, 1872 or something, or 1792 or something. Pennsylvania came first. Whatever.
Okay.
But it's just interesting that those two are the two primary folks that got started. Yes, the Irish came. Yes, they were making Irish whiskey. Yes, the Scotch came. They were making Scotch, but they couldn't make barley, or they couldn't get barley to grow. So everybody either used rye or they used corn. Corn became the more prevalent, much easier to grow, and the yield was so much higher. At their peak, the Overholts were doing 200 gallons a week, and Jim Beam, the Beams, were doing way more than that. So anyway,
so just to settle on Scotch, right? So Scotch doesn't use corn, okay? Right? What does it use?
100% barley. 100%
all barley.
All barley.
So the taste between Scotch and bourbon is like very distinct.
It's very different.
Would you say? I mean, yeah. Well, because I don't know, man. I have to think about it.
So
the Scotch, when I drink Scotch, it's more smoky. But go ahead.
It depends on where you're getting it from.
Yeah,
so if you think about Scotland and you think about Kentucky, they're two entirely different regions. Scotland is cold and wet, and for the most part, not a lot of trees. So what are you going to get to burn? You don't have a lot of stuff to burn, but you have all of this peat or decaying organic matter that has dried out that you can burn. And when you're burning it, it's very smoky. So if you're bubbling your wort for your whiskey or your mash, you're going to get some of that essence into it. Corn, we got trees everywhere. We can burn trees to have our fire going, to get our mash going. We don't. So everything about it's different.
Well,
the way it's made is completely different.
Totally different. So how about Scotland's water? What are we talking? Is it it must be glacial water, maybe?
Well, there's no glaciers in Scotland, but it's all
okay.
I don't want to mislead people because I don't know, but I would not be surprised if it isn't limestone water as well.
Well, I'm reminded of water, I don't know what the longitude of Scotland is, but Wisconsin has the Driftless Glen, which is glacially driven. There's a huge deposit of limestone up there. I mean, huge.
Have you had any Driftless Glen? That's good stuff.
Oh yeah, I've had plenty, and it is really good. I didn't realize it then how good it was, to be honest with you, and it was because of the water. It's because of the water, and it's a really, really well kept secret still. I don't see it very often anyway. When I see it, oh yeah, I know that. That's good stuff because of the water. Same thing with New Riff. New Riff has really good water relative to just on the other side of the mountains for some strange reason.
Yeah.
And the only reason I know that is because the New Riff rep brought the water. And it cracks me up. It's like, well, yeah, water's water. No, it isn't.
You need a certain amount of calcium in it to make it work right.
Well, that stuff was very, very good. Okay. So we did the corn, the bubble. Uh, well, let me ask you this: you're plugged in? Where do you think this thing is going in the next 10 years? What do you think? Seriously.
Scotch is in trouble. This is my
Okay,
opinion.
that's fine.
Scotch is in trouble because they have way too much. The world has been saturated with Scotch for 150 years. Um, they don't really have new markets for it. Struggle, but going to be fine because it's a burgeoning market. We have not traditionally gone to Europe, gone to Australia, wherever, gone to Taiwan. So while we have a in story right now in aging, we're going to be fine because we've got continents we can sell to. I mean, the whole
that.
African
Mhm.
continent. We have all of Australia that is really, they've bought what we've sold them, pretty much. We've got South America.
You're right. I hadn't even thought
That,
about Australia. You're right.
I mean,
South
Australia
Africa.
buys what
Wow.
we can get. Exactly. Really, a palate. What's going to touch somebody's palate? I mean, the whole
Well,
U.S.
yeah.
urban explosion simply happened because people wanted to try something new. And it really isn't new. It's the stuff that back in the day, back in the 60s, the people of the 60s did not want to have what their grandad because they didn't believe in anything their grandfathers and fathers stood for. So bourbon took a
That's
hit.
right.
And from the 60s
Big
through the
hit.
70s into the 80s, bourbon was non-existent. They struggled.
It was
And
all
all of a
white
sudden,
drinks,
all
all
those
clear
kids grew
drinks.
up and they said,
Yeah.
you know what?
This stuff's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time that somebody actually made clear bourbon. I mean, you strip out
Oh my gosh.
all of the
What
things
the
that makes bourbon.
clear beer, Zima.
Yeah.
There was weird stuff going. Bartles and James. It was all clear, crystal clear drinks, cocaine, Ferraris, and martinis, which is which is fine. I think Frank Sinatra saved Jack Daniels just by getting out of a helicopter with a Jack Daniels thingamajigger. Right. So that brought, but
Yeah.
even through the
So now
'60s,
Jack Daniels sells. Yeah.
right, right,
Jack Daniels sells Sinatra. It's their high-end product.
right. So once again, so American, such an American story. The industry was down and out. It was almost gone. Vodka was going to kill it. All those gin, anything, and then it came back, and it came back on its own too. That's what I like about it. It wasn't advertised into existence. It just came back because people rediscovered it. And I look at all the black market, the secondary market. And even when I go into a liquor store now and I see a bottle that's $67, it's like, dude, that is not. I mean, it's a $30 bottle, if anything. I know the cost on that thing is 15, $18 maybe, but I understand it. And I won't. That's why I like the old stuff, the Wild Turkey. I'll I'm more in the 100. So Old Forester, the old brands that really haven't had that big of a spike are still true and honest. These other guys who like Woodford. Do you like Woodford? Because I'm about to really
I
scorch those
I am
guys.
not a Woodford fan. I have Woodford in our stable.
Yeah, right.
For some reason, of all of the whiskeys I've had, Woodford always is hot to me. At 90 proof, it should not be hot. And
It's
every
young,
time I have it, it just feels hot. You know, I'm drinking this 115 right now. It doesn't feel
smooth.
hot.
Yeah.
I love love Old Forester 120. Some the other
That's
night,
my favorite.
and Old Forester 120 does not drink like our 18 or 1920. It's
1920.
115 proof.
Yeah, but it
It
doesn't
does
taste
not.
like that. Yeah,
No, it's
I know.
Woodford.
And
Woodford always put me off bourbon because I
I'll
was
tell you
still
what.
young in it, and had I had a whole bottle of it, I probably would not have uh, kept doing bourbon. But I only
You'd be
had a
drinking
glass.
gin.
I mean, I bought it at a restaurant. Yeah,
Well, a
I'm
buddy of
not that
mine
guy.
introduced me to
Sorry.
Woodford back when Woodford was still small. It was really Woodford. This is like 2011, 12, and the Woodford was very good. Versailles, it's from Versailles. It was very, very good. Woodford was good back then.
Besides,
This is even before Bullet got popular. So Woodford was good, but this is back when Jefferson Ocean was good. No, I mean, both those companies piss me off. Woodford the most. Now it's everywhere. They invest more in marketing than they do in producing their product. That's fine. The original Woodford guys sold out. They made $1 million. Whatever. Jefferson Ocean is just now disappointing because the first 3, 4, 5 voyages were excellent. They were just really good, and then after that, it's like, well, why does it suck so bad? It's like because they corporated, they they punch their tickets. That's all right. So that's why I go back to the old guys, the Wild Turkeys, the Old Forester. Uh, was it Old Crow? Old Crow, right?
Old Crow, the story of Old Crow. Okay, it's Oscar Pepper. Yeah, of the Pepper family. I think it was Oscar. Oscar was a farmer, and his dad, and I cannot remember his dad's name, but Elijah Pepper. Elijah Pepper uh, got the whiskey going 1820-ish, and it really got his whiskey going great. And when he passed away, Oscar, his son, took over, and Oscar didn't really have the skill set to make whiskey, but he was a smart guy, so he hired some. So the guy he hired was a guy by the name of, and Jim Crow was fresh off the boat from Edinburgh, Scotland, where he had got his degree in medicine and biology. So he's got this skill set to where he could write things down and track what he was doing. So he came to America and he bumbled about and eventually ended up in Woodford County, uh, Kentucky. Oscar saw him and said, "You know what? I would like you to come to work for me." And Jim only made product. He was probably America's first master distiller that wasn't a family member. So Oscar has his distillery. Jim Crow is making whiskey. And it's technically, I guess you could call it bourbon, but there wasn't the standards that we have today for bourbon.
Right. It was
So they experimented with their barrels. They experimented with the sour mash. They experimented with aging. They did all this stuff. But Oscar Pepper expanded the distillery, making many different things. All Jim Crow did was make whiskey. He did not try to make himself famous. He didn't try to do anything other than that. Fast forward 20 years, Civil War. Jim Crow, or Old Crow as it became to be known, was the whiskey of choice because, one, it was readily available because Pepper made so much of it, and it was consistent. Batch after batch after batch after batch taste exactly the same as the last one
because they had a
Jim
master
Crow had
distiller.
refined it so much.
Right.
Exactly. He knew what he was doing. He passes away, and it becomes known as Crow 10 or Old Crow bourbon whiskey because it was from that area of the country near Bourbon County, but it was actually coming out of Woodford. And get this,
Right.
the Old Pepper Distillery on the grounds where Woodford Reserve is today.
Of course it is.
So James Pepper, Colonel James Pepper, he's the one that did all of the things, old Pepper whiskey the way it is today. Jim Beam has recently, or not recently, 20 years ago, purchased Old Crow. They purchased Old Granddad. They purchased Old Overhold, and they call that series their Olds. They even have a line called Old Tub, referencing the tub that the whiskey was stored in.
Hey, have you had
That's their
Old Crow
series
lately?
Yes, but I don't remember anything about it other
Right.
than being face down in the snow when I was in college. I was going to say high school, but it wasn't. It wasn't high school. It was college. Yeah, it's been.
I haven't had it in like at least
60
years.
No,
at least 6 years.
I'm not that old. 50 years probably.
Wow. Oh man. Well, hey, listen. It's 7:30. I'm gonna have to go, but this is good. Do you have so give us a final word on what do you want to do? You want to get what? Yeah. Give us a final word on some pearls of wisdom.
Pearls of wisdom. Have fun. If there is anything I tell my kids when they go somewhere, make sure you have fun. It's the only wisdom I've ever given my kids is, well, there's two things. Whatever you do, before you do it, just think, what would Dad think if I get? Okay, that's the first thing.
Saw that coming.
If you don't get caught, have fun. So that's my pearls of wisdom. How about that?
I love to have fun. You know what? It's actually kind of apropos right now because even these entrepreneurs that are millionaire. If you're a billionaire, you can afford to say to everyone else, "Just have fun." But in essence, this is truth. I mean, you don't have to be a billionaire to have fun. You don't. Like we had fun,
No.
and I'm not a. Well, you're a billionaire, but I'm not.
I'm so far from a billionaire. The other day, I got to tell you this. I'm at work, and every holiday, they pass out dollars for doing things. Okay, so let's say I sell a delivery or whatever, and it's a higher end delivery, whatever. I sell. Okay, I get $1. I sell a 8x10 rug. I get $1. So I go into the office and I'm collecting my dollars, and they said, "Well, how many dollars you get today?" And I pull out my billfold. I got $13. Okay. I said, "Well, I'm a dollar heir." Whoever said they were a dollar heir before?
I can honestly say nobody. Oh well, Brian. Now listen. This has been a gold mine of excellent nuggets. Excellent nuggets. The historical things, everything.
It's I always tell people, worthless knowledge is entertaining to know.
I'll tell you what was worthless last week is not worthless today. It's all coming back to the interaction that we're having. I mean, serious. The human stuff is more important now, more than, and we didn't even talk about artificial intelligence. I don't want to go there because I could talk for hours.
No,
but
I was waiting for you to bring it up.
I didn't.
You just let me talk today.
I want the human stuff. I want it. But gosh, dang.
I was ready for it though.
Oh, you were? Well, okie dokie. I can go. No, I have to go to the bathroom. Well, let's do this again. It's almost been a year since we did this. So
Absolutely.
anyway, all
I
right,
know.
let's close it,
Anyway,
and then you and I should talk
it's been
again.
fun.
Let's get the daughters in on this, though. Seriously, those guys are hilarious. I mean,
Yes, they are.
the ladies are
They,
fun.
they make me whole.
How could they not?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love, I
I
tell
mean,
people all the time, it's like you get three generations. Not only that, you get, people who weren't born in the industry that have adopted, and then you get women, which I think is the most important aspect you can talk about is get a woman's view on this stuff. Seriously, because sell a guy bourbon and tell him that it's cool. That's easy. We're dumb. But if a woman like they analyze it's like okay, all
yeah.
right, I appreciate their opinion. I'll probably lose my man card, but a little bit more than the guys because we all love bourbon and whiskey as guys. Not women don't in general, but when they do, it's because you know they've tasted it, they've analyzed it, and this is really good. Okay, and,
There's
and your
a
daughter,
layer.
wow,
Yeah, there's a layer of sophistication, and
perfect.
for a guy to say there is a layer of sophistication, it's pretentious. I mean, yeah, we drink bourbon. You just said it. It's easy
We're
for
not
guys to.
sophisticated.
But if a woman comes in and she's drinking bourbon, everybody goes. They turn and she just ordered a bourbon.
You're exactly right.
We
Yeah,
need to watch her, and they may be watching her for reasons. Maybe she's a loose woman,
at first,
or maybe yeah. And all of a sudden they realize, wait a minute,
boom.
there's intelligence here.
No, she knows her
And
stuff because yeah,
we've talked about it. We've talked about it so many times that typically try to go to bed around 11ish, but many nights we've got that much left, and we start to talk, and we end up talking till midnight about the way clarinets were made back in the day before Bach even knew they existed. And I'm going, how are we talking about this? Or we talk about, I mentioned the way the ships are made,
right.
and how the trees were grown. I mean, we go everywhere.
That's the story of bourbon.
My kids are
That is the story
way
of bourbon.
smarter than me. Yeah, my kids are so much smarter than I am. It's just amazing how we can get on a. We were talking the other day about a PBS kids show. It's called Acoustic Rooster. Okay, it's on the PBS Kids channel for children. Acoustic Rooster is a who loves music, and they're trying to teach kids about music, and they were talking about call and response in the episode. The girls and I talked for an hour about music and how it developed and how you put things together and how jazz works. It's just craziness. And I sit back, my bourbon.
I love it. Yeah, that's bourbon. That's right. Wow. All right. Okay. Brian, thank you very much.
I'll let you shut down.
Yeah, I got to shut down. I got to go to the bathroom.
You're very welcome.
Let's do this again. Seriously, before the fall season.
Okay.
All right, Brian.
We'll look at our calendars in August-ish.
You got it. Thanks, Brian. We'll talk to you later. Thanks to everyone who listens to this and has fun. Have fun.